Welcome to my review of Devastator for Sega CD. This is a very little known action game for the system. The system really didn't have a lot of great games. It does have some really, it has like two awesome games. For me at least, Sonic CD and Dark Wizard, which was an awesome strategy game, turn-based strategy game. But, aside from those two games, there is some other good games, and I guess there's some other games that you could say are great, but they're not on the level of those two games, at least for me. But you do have some pretty good action games that, are easy to overlook on the system. And they were exclusive to the Sega CD, so, there are definitely some games to look out for on the Sega CD, but, overall it was a very disappointing machine. Though I did really enjoy it for the few games that I really put time into back in the day. But this was a game I didn't own. I played this on emulation fairly recently. And I made a tutorial on this game, so I'll link the tutorial in the description. That'll go into some of the smaller nuances and details that, of course, I don't remember now because, I beat this a while ago, so my mind's not going to be super clear on all the details, but I do remember enjoying this game, and it was definitely a fun game. As you can see, some of the bosses are very exploitable, as I'm usually, pretty good at finding exploits in these kind of games, and, I usually try pulling bullshit immediately a lot of times, so that was an easy one to find, but, some of the bosses can be a little exploitable, but most of them I remember being pretty decent, boss fights. They weren't like super easy to exploit, and they were enjoyable. I kind of like when I can exploit bosses anyway, so that's usually not a huge complaint for me, but I could see it being a weakness if all the bosses were that easy. It does weaken the integrity of the entire experience, when if the game is too easy. So here's another boss fight. There's a lot of boss fights in this game. And this one was kind of cool with the scaling effects, with the boss zooming in and out of the background. And it's used to good effect for the gameplay. It's not just a visual effect, but it changes the way you have to move around the environment. So this was a cool boss fight, having to use the platforms to move around. And really, this is just a good action game. I mean, it's just a good side-scrolling action game, and it's one that really most people probably haven't heard of. I didn't really know much about it either. I may have seen ads for it, but that's about it. This wasn't one that stuck out of my memory. I just tried it on the emulation setup. It looked fucking cool in the preview video. That's how I find a lot of games. Or I see videos on YouTube where the game looks cool. I'm also always scanning for new victims as far as games to beat. I like building the game's beaten list. So, whenever I see games that look easy, that's another reason I'll try games and sample games. In my Trying It Out series, a lot of the games I try, I may only try them for 2 or 3 minutes because I'm, kind of trying to get a feel for if I think the game's going to be an easy victim or not. Sometimes I'm just hunting for some low-hanging fruit. In this case, this just looked like a good game. I wasn't really looking for an easy game when I put this on. I just wanted to play something good. So it's kind of a mix. But yeah, this is a cool game, and it does mix it up a little bit. You have some side-scrolling shooter-style levels. Of course, the hitbox is pretty damn massive for a side-scrolling shooter, as you can see. The character, is a bit large and awkward, but the levels are designed well with that in mind. It doesn't get cheap to where you have to try to squeeze in between, bullets with the huge character. You can eliminate a lot of the enemies ahead of time, so, it's designed pretty well. It doesn't really get in the way. And you'll have, bosses like this during the side-scrolling, the side-scrolling shooting type of sections. There's pretty much bosses on every level from what I remember. And they're all really, really detailed looking, really nice visual style. I don't remember the music being anything memorable, but I don't think it was completely generic either, but that's not a part that stands out for me in my memory. But I do remember having fun with this, and there is a few different weapons I believe that you can switch between. You see I have Laser 2 equipped now. And now I have something, I believe it says Bomer, whatever the fuck that is. Like I said, my memory's pretty hazy because I haven't played this in a while, so I don't remember exactly how that works, but as I'm watching the video now, I can kind of observe what's going on. I see, it appears I'm switching weapons somehow, either manually or by picking up different weapons. That I'm not sure about, but you see I got the spread shot now. Now I'm back to the laser. I think what's happening is I'm picking up new weapons from what I'm seeing here. I don't know if you can manually, swap out weapons on the fly. Not sure if you can do that, but I do remember the gameplay of this game and enjoying it. And it is pretty challenging, too. Like, some of the side-scrolling stages, I remember can be pretty challenging. You have to have, you have to, like, kind of play some of the stages kind of slow and creep through, take out enemies, and use some strategy, which is cool. It's not just running through and blasting everything like Contra style, which, Contra is mostly that. In most of the Contra games, it's mostly memorizing fast paths through the levels. You don't usually stand around too long. But in this game, there's a little bit more of a tactical element to it. You kind of will take your time and try to snipe out some of the enemies. It's not as bad as Journey to Silius, which feels like the whole game pretty much feels like you're creeping through and sniping out enemies. And I explained that in my review and my tutorial of that game. It's not a bad game for the NES, but this is a much better game. This is actually, this does it right where you take your time through some parts, but you also, there's some parts where you can move kind of quick. But you don't have to creep through the entire game. But you do have to play tactically at times. The game will force you to take some areas slowly and take out the enemies first. Because, they take too much damage to just run through, so you'll have to, kind of make sure you take them out first. And you can't always jump over the enemies. But you have a nice mix here. You see there's some platforming where you're on a moving platform and you have to kind of dodge these swinging things and kill enemies. It's all well done. And I think if you like what you're seeing here in this footage, I kind of isolated some of the standout moments. But if you like what you're seeing in this review, I definitely recommend checking the game out. Especially if, you're looking for games on the Sega CD. It's easy to miss some of the better ones because they just kind of blend in. And there's not a lot of coverage on a lot of Sega CD games, as the system itself is kind of obscure. It wasn't a popular add-on. And, the games do get mentioned here and there, but there's a lot of games that don't really get too much attention. Like Barry Arm is quite a good shooter for the Sega CD that doesn't get mentioned. And, there's multiple games on the Sega CD that I should probably review that would be good to cover. But this is one of the better ones. And it offers a pretty good challenge. It's really not too difficult from what I remember. I'm sure that I have the completion time listed in my tutorial of the game, so that'll probably detail all those little minor details. And of course, the game is fresh in my mind when I make the tutorial, so I'll have much more detailed analysis of the game in that. Some of the bosses have multi-part fights where, like this case, the body breaks off and you gotta fight the body and then the head. And I believe this is the final boss, so this is probably the most fleshed out of the boss fights. I don't remember it being too difficult. But the game overall, it was a decent challenge. Probably, a moderate challenge for an old school kind of game. It's definitely not on the upper end of challenge for old style, 8 and 16-bit style games. Games were a lot harder the farther back you go. As you get more and more modern, games on the average got easier and easier. 8-bit games were some of the hardest console games, and then when you went into 16-bit, you would see some games were starting to get easier. I mean, they were still really, really hard games, but it was just on average, games were more approachable and beatable. And that pretty much continued up until now, where games are pretty much a fucking joke. I mean, if you've been playing games for a while, most games are designed for you to beat them on default. But yeah, overall, I would give this game a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's somewhere between, good and great. To me, it's not a great game, but I think it's quite a good game for the Sega CD that's easy to overlook, and it's an enjoyable playthrough. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.